What if there was a method you could use to enhance your sprint, jump, or upper body performance? I'm talking about something legal, not something you have to take, but something that you could do to enhance both your in-training and competition performance. Does that interest you? Well, if it does, that's what we're talking about in today's video, so keep watching. Hi guys, and welcome back to Fit with T. I hope you guys are good. This is another video in my Sprint and ABC series, and today we're on the letter P, and we're talking about post-activation potentiation. Now that might sound like a fancy, long word, but really and truly guys, it's quite simple, and I want to hopefully try and make it simple for you guys and give you practical tips so that you can implement it into your training or competition, etc, etc. So post-activation potentiation, PAP, or PAP for short, is the idea that muscles can be potentiated or activated if you use a movement, an exercise or stimulus that requires maximum effort or near maximum effort. So in other words, if you do a specific activating movement followed by another similar movement without the same level of weight and after a specific rest period, then the second movement can be performed more efficiently, more effectively, or with greater power or force due to the fact that the first exercise that you did required the same sort of contraction but with much more effort, right? So for example, if you paired a heavy squat, which is a strength-based exercise, with a box jump, which is an explosive or a plyometric exercise, you can get this effect that we're talking about. So in this example, the heavy squat would act as your activating, your potentiating exercise, so that would potentiate your muscles for the box jump. So if you do a heavy squat, so somewhere around the region of 75% to 95% of your 1 rep max, something that requires near maximum effort or maximum effort, now that you go and do a box jump just with your body weight, that exercise should be able to feel like easier for you. You should feel more explosive, more powerful, of course, after you're giving yourself a bit of a rest. About 4 to 12 minutes after the heavy squat, you go and do a box jump, you should feel more explosive. It should feel much easier. You're not moving as much weight, so your muscles are actually ready to produce that same sort of force again, but you just have your body weight, and so you should be more explosive and be able to execute that exercise better or more explosively than you would have done if you just did a box jump by itself. And that's an example of two exercises that require similar movement, similar contractions, but you do the heavy or near maximum effort lift first, which was the squat in this example, and then you do an explosive movement, which is the box jump in this example, and they both require the same squat movement, and therefore that's why you compare those two together. So that's the idea of post-activation potentiation, PAP, PAP, and that was a gym example. But what about when it comes to sprinting? So the good thing is post-activation potentiation can also be applied to sprinting. In this study, they looked at how plyometric and particularly alternate bound or alternating bound can enhance acceleration when used as a potentiating exercise. What they found was that if you do alternate bound before you go to accelerate, particularly 3 times 10 with a specific amount of rest in between, again, they can actually help to enhance your sprint acceleration and performance. And what they found was that effect can be enhanced if you wear a weighted vest. So what does all of this mean for you and for me as athletes, as sprinters? Number one, it means that in the gym, you can enhance your training if you pair heavy lifts with explosive movements, okay? So you want to make sure that those movements are similar, that they use the same sort of muscle contraction, but then you also want to make sure that you have the right amount of rest or enough rest, the optimal amount of rest in between those two exercises. So for example, like I mentioned before, if you do a heavy squat, you want to make sure that you have around 4 to 12 minutes to rest, and trying to figure out what's ideal for you is going to be unique to you. When it comes to bench press, the ideal amount of rest is usually around 3 to 12 minutes, and power cleans, the ideal amount of rest is about 7 minutes according to the research. Secondly, what that means for your sprinting is that in training, if you're doing acceleration days or in competition, you know, in your warm-up or even as part of your pre-meet, for example, you can actually add 3 times 10 alternating bounds to your routine, to your warm-up, to actually help you enhance that first 10 to 20 meters of your acceleration on those days. So now you know that you can add that. That's something that you could actually implement. If you have access to a weight jacket that can actually give you enhanced benefits, then in terms of rest, the study found that about 8 minutes was optimal for most athletes when it comes to the break between your alternating bounds and your acceleration. So on a competition day, for example, as long as you have at least 8 minutes, which you generally would have prior to running, then you can do your 3 times 10 alternating bound. But before you run off and go and implement this, here are a few things that you need to think about and consider as a last thought before you go and add this to your training or your competition or however you're going to use it. So number one, stronger athletes actually benefit more from post-activation potentiation than weaker athletes, okay? So if you're an athlete who is strength challenged or not yet as trained or experienced when it comes to strength training, you might want to actually develop that first before going into using PAP method in your training, okay? Because the benefits last for longer and we're more seen or more enhanced in athletes who are stronger. So if you're an athlete who has quite a lot of experience when it comes to strength training, resistance work, and you're quite strong, then this method can actually be more effective for you. The second thing you want to consider before you run off and start implementing this method is actually to hit the like button if this video has been helpful for you guys, to let me know, to let the algorithm know, and so that more athletes like you can see this video. But on a more serious note, the other thing you really want to consider before you implement this method, or when you are implementing this method, is just the volume of training that you're doing, the amount of rest that you're giving yourself. So that's rest in between reps and sets, that's rest in between sessions. So if you haven't checked out this video about the dangers of overtraining, I really encourage you to check that video out. Or if you haven't seen this video, I talk about how often you should sprint, and look at the fact that to sprint fast doesn't necessarily require you to sprint every single day. Sometimes not running is actually what you need. Then check that video out as well, and I'll see you guys on another Friday. Bye guys.